Hi, this is Dr. Sam Shea. I'm founder of 10pointwellness.com. I am a chiropractor, acupuncturist, and functional neurologist practicing here in Hamilton, New Zealand, as well as coaching clients worldwide online. And in today's video, I'm going to cover this interesting phenomenon people observe, and that I've seen too, is that men tend to die quick, violent deaths, while women tend to die from slow, painful ones. And the reason why has a lot to do with brain imbalance. Now, many people have heard of this left brain, right brain stuff, and for the hardcore neurology geeks, they say, well, that's not entirely true because there's a piece of tissue called the corpus callosum that connects them all together, and they're all more integrated than we think. And the answer is you're right, and also this tendency is also true. The brain is very complex. You can't make it simplistic by saying left brain and right brain only. However, in terms of practically, clinically, what you see, it really does, for the majority of cases, fall into left and right brain. Not 100%, but a lot. So I'm going to share with you why that is. Now, the left brain is typically associated with the male, and the right brain is typically associated with female. Now, why is that hormonally, physiologically? Why is that true? Why does that even happen? And the answer has to do with hormones. Now, the left side of the brain has more testosterone receptors, and what that means is that if you have a bunch of testosterone in your system, like males, your left brain will be more stimulated because you have more places for testosterone to dock and activate that side of the brain. The reverse is true with females, where you've got more estrogen receptors on the right side of the brain, so that if you have more estrogen in your system, then the right side of the brain is going to be more stimulated, more active, simply because there's more places for the estrogen to stimulate. So that's why the brains why males and females seemingly to have this consistent pattern, not always, but most of the time, of left brain versus right brain. Now, in terms of what does that look like, you got males using logic, females are using more feeling, males tend to act, while females tend to think. I mean, the joke is that men act and don't think, and women think and don't always act. And males are very super picky detail, while women seem to be about the big picture. Men are about just the facts, ma'am, just the facts. And females are kind of more imaginative and creative. Men are more involved with words and language, where women are about symbols and images. And clinically, in terms of health, this is really important, that the male side, the left brain has a stronger connection to the rest and digest function, also called the parasympathetics. Now, for you Scrabble enthusiasts, parasympathetics is that part of that long word that describes the part of your nervous system that calms you down, helps you digest food, relax, all the things that help you heal, build, repair for the long term. Whereas the right side of the brain has stronger connections to the fight or flight or sympathetic nervous system, which is quite the opposite. The sympathetic nervous system is about stress, danger, short-term survival. And for the neurogeeks out there, it has to do with the connections with what's called the insular cortex, which if you were to take, the brain and kind of open it here, you would see this other smaller lump of tissue under there. It's called the insular cortex. That's where most of the connections are within the right brain to the sympathetic nervous system. So what we're seeing here is that men generally have a more rest and digest baseline neurological tone, where women have the reverse, a more fight or flight, constant state of anxiety. So now the question is that how does this look like clinically in terms of health? Men usually die from quick, violent deaths, and the reason why is that they have excessive left brain activity. So, for example, men die from violence, which is action without thinking. That is hyper left brain activity. So men get into fights and get hurt, possibly killed. Same thing with sporting events, like boxing. They're so left-brained. It's just action, action, action. No room for thinking, no time for thinking, just act. Men die from stupidity, like the show Jackass. There's really not that many women on the show Jackass. And they have these famous last words like, hey, watch this, and then they're gone, they're out of the gene pool. And men also die from accidents. And the question is, who gets more ADD? Is it boys or girls? And it's boys. 3-to-1 ratio, 4-to-1 ratio, depending on whose numbers you look at. Boys get more ADD than girls do. And what happens is that leads to accidents. So the other thing about left brain activity is that you have a higher propensity towards fatal arrhythmias. Now, an arrhythmia means that your heart loses its rhythm. You don't none of this lub. You have lub dub, which is fine. But if you've got you can die from that. And the reason why men have fatal arrhythmias more than women is because the left side of the brain controls the rhythm of the heart. And if you have a hyper left brain activity, you have an arrhythmia, as opposed to the right side, which controls the tempo. So you can have a fast heartbeat as long as it's not out of rhythm. And women tend to get faster heartbeats, like the Scrabble word's called tachycardia. So that explains why men die from violence, accidents, stupidity, and fatal arrhythmias. And if you want a satirical understanding of this, I recommend you read my article called Blokeitis. Now, Blokeitis is basically an article I put together. It's satire with a couple specific male patients in mind. Here in New Zealand we call them blokes. In the U.S. you call them jocks or alpha men or domineering men or whatever. And basically it's explaining why males have most men have a hard time getting under clinical care, and they keep doing more and more damaging things to themselves. Now, the first bit is satire. Symptoms of blokeitis include mild hypertrophy of the right bicep from showing it off too much or lifting too many beer cans, or obsessive interest with sports and sports paraphernalia, and in New Zealand fishing, and and continuing to do bloke-like activities like rugby and smashing their heads even more, and doing just doing these blokey things. However, the reason it's satire is because I wanted men to read it, as opposed to like, here's a clinical document to help you with your brain. No, they're not going to do that. If it's funny, they'll read it. But the second half of the article is really a very specific clinical explanation of how to treat post-concussive syndrome. Post-concussive syndrome is that thing where you do a lot of repetitive head bashing activities like rugby in New Zealand or American football, gridiron in the States, and that creates brain damage, and as well aggressivity, depression, and strange behaviors, even neurological degeneration. Look at Muhammad Ali. The dude has Parkinson's, really bad now. So that article covers how to treat post-concussive syndrome: oxygenation, afferentation, which is brain stimulation, and nutrition, and the three legs of how to rebuild someone's brain. So have a read. Here's an example of part of the article: excessive interest in sports, the mild hypertrophy in the right bicep, funny stuff, but then it gets serious later. So that's men. Now, we see why men die quick, violent deaths. Now, why is it that women die from slow, painful deaths, usually? And if you look at the statistics, as well as if you think about women in your own life, who gets most of the chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, insomnia, depression, blood sugar issues, hypothyroid? Who gets the autoimmune diseases, the irritable bowel syndromes, the weird colon issues like ulcerative colitis? Who is it that gets all of these chronic degenerative diseases in the majority? And it's women. In fact, 90% of all fibromyalgia /ME. ME was a shorthand for a synonym for fibromyalgia, basically full body muscle pain that's on all the time, dull, achy, sometimes burning that just doesn't go away in every muscle in your body. And that's mostly in women. It does happen in men, because I've treated some men, but by far the majority of patients I've had have been women who have had fibromyalgia, and I've treated a bunch. So here's how it happens. here is how chronic right brain anxiety causes chronic disease, based on physiology, not guessing. This is how it happens. So your stress response, remember how I said the right brain is more stronger linked to the stress response? That stress response is designed to be short-term survival. Like there's a tiger in the bushes, going to jump out, chase you, and like run you down and eat you. And then if you survive, great, it's over. But you know, you're not supposed to be chronically freaking out about it unless you happen to be dropped off in the middle of, you know, the Bengal tiger forest or whatever. Yeah, then you'd be a little scared all the time. So, or if you end up on Pandora, you know, in Avatar or something, you get the freaky blue tigers coming after you. So that stress response is designed to save your life in short term. It is designed to save your life, and you would die without the stress response. There's some people out there in the health world who think stress response is bad, it's evil, we should get rid of it. No, you need it to survive. You just only need it when you need to survive, not all the time. So the problem is that through millions of years of adapting to living in the wilderness as hunter-gatherers, our body makes no distinction of a real danger versus imagined danger. So whether it's a pharmaceutical ad scaring you about heart disease, or you listen to news that is very stressful, your body makes no distinction between that and the fact that your chief just told you that there's a pack of wolves waiting out there outside the campsite that are ready to attack everybody. Your body makes no distinction. Because you hear about something scary, you will go into survival and stress. So what happens is that when you go into a fear response, your heart rate goes up. Why? Because you need to push blood to your muscles to run or fight. Your blood leaves your internal organs to go to your arms and legs so you can run or fight. Now the problem is, over time, your internal organs will break down because it needs blood and nutrition in order to repair and turn over. Some of these intestinal cells live hard, die hard. I mean, some of them last a couple hours. Some last a couple days. You need blood there constantly to help rebuild. Otherwise, the intestine will break down and you'll get these indigestion, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, irritable bowel syndrome, leaky gut, and leaky gut causes autoimmune diseases. Because if your colon is supposed to be, you know, sealed like this, and then when it gets holes in it, then bacteria from your gut, their byproducts, feces or undigested proteins leak into the bloodstream. The body says, oh my God, foreign weird material, quick, launch the heat-seeking homing missiles called antibodies. They're two-pronged little forks that attack some strange floating protein. And then the problem is that these are homing missiles that attack these products in the blood based on shape. And if you have any tissue in your body that looks similar, you have what's called collateral damage. So for example, if a baby takes cow milk instead of mother's milk, they'll have milk bovine protein floating around the blood because it went through the leaky gut. And now the body will attack milk bovine protein, but the problem is that the same antibody also attacks the insulin-producing cells of the pancreas, causing type 1 diabetes, which now used to be called juvenile diabetes. Now they've called it type 1, because now you got adults getting it as well, because now adults' guts are getting so leaky. And by the way, baby's gut is supposed to be leaky when they're born because they're supposed to take the immunoglobulins from mama's breast milk. That's what the baby should be having, not cow milk. Otherwise you can end up with juvenile, now called type 1 diabetes. Now, other autoimmune diseases are very similar. Rheumatoid arthritis is when, you know, fungus gets through. Or if you've got a Yersinia that leaks through, you can get thyroid autoimmune diseases. You can get, like, wheat has been linked to MS, or myasthenia gravis. And like the list can go on and on. So the lesson here is to heal and seal the gut so that the things don't leak through in the first place, so you don't get this immune response. So what also happens is that under stress, your body secretes this hormone called cortisol. Now, under chronic stress, you have chronic cortisol release. And if you have chronic stress, you shut down growth hormone. Now, which makes sense because if you are under stress, you're not interested in repairing the complex inner workings of your organs. You're interested in running away from the tiger. So repair work has to be put on hold. You have to be busy making sure your arm doesn't get chewed off, right? So growth hormone gets shut down, and you need growth hormone to repair the gut. And if you don't have it, you can't repair. So there's multiple ways chronic stress can destroy the gut lining. Now, other things that happen is that when you're under chronic stress, cholesterol, one of the most important substances in the human body, not your worst enemy, unlike what some of the medical establishment wants you to believe, cholesterol is so important to your human body, even under stress, because it's the basis of your stress hormones. In fact, cholesterol does go up in a lot of people's lives, not because they're having problems with their hearts, because they're stressing out. Like they've got a mortgage and kids and job security issues and whatever. So the problem is that when you're under stress, chronic stress, cholesterol has a choice. It either goes into anabolic sex hormones like testosterone, progesterone, etc., or it goes into cortisol, the stress hormone. Now, for you physiology geeks out there and Scrabble enthusiasts, the technical term is called a pregnenolone shunt. If you want to look that up, it's called a pregnenolone shunt. Basically, pregnenolone is a precursor to either your sex hormones or stress hormones, and it's on the cholesterol pathway, okay? And that's when the body decides, do I need to survive, or am I going for long-term healing, health, growth, repair, and function? Now, here's more ways how chronic stress creates chronic disease. Here's why you see people with fibromyalgia also have chronic fatigue and depression and insomnia. So what happens? You're under chronic stress. When you're under chronic stress, you use up all your B vitamins. Your B vitamins, they're used quickly because you need them quickly to generate energy quickly to run away from the tiger. You don't have the luxury or the time to send sugar through the normal metabolic pathway through the, again, another Scrabble word, mitochondria, which is the powerhouse of the cell. The sugar can't go through this long but efficient electricity plant that generates lots and lots of energy. If you put sugar through a normal cell, you get 36 units of energy. But if you don't have time because you're in survival, you need to make energy now, like 100 times faster than if you put it through that mitochondria. So what you get instead of 36 units of energy, you get 2 units of energy and 2 units of smoke, which we call lactic acid, which is that molecule in the body that causes the muscles to burn. So what happens is that under chronic stress, your sugar gets burned up really quickly, so you get lots of lactic acid buildup in all your muscles of the body all the time for a period of time, and we call that fibromyalgia. You only get 2 units of energy instead of 36. That means you get 1/18 the amount of energy, which means you're tired all the time, and we call that chronic fatigue syndrome. By the way, do you know what the medical term syndrome actually means? It stands for blame the patient. Okay? Feel free to laugh, it's fine. So it stands for who gets syndrome. Oh, you have chronic fatigue syndrome, which actually means we don't know why it's causing it or what's happening, how to make it go away. So it's a syndrome, which means you're stuck with it. You know, even you go through all the syndromes, they are all basically blame the patient, including sudden infant death syndrome. They're blaming the baby. Okay, it gets that sinister. So just whenever you hear the word syndrome, it's medical speak for we don't know what it is, or we don't want to admit we know what it is, and we don't have a way to manage it by our definition, which means make your symptoms go away in exchange for another set of more tolerable symptoms. Until those become intolerable, then we can drug those. It means we're going to blame you. And it means you're hopeless. And by the way, you have some antidepressants because you're hopeless. So that's what syndrome means. So moving on. So you have fibromyalgia. You have chronic fatigue. Now, here's the issue, is that if you use up all your B vitamins, you need B vitamins to convert serotonin, the body's feel-good molecule, you can't convert tryptophan into serotonin without B vitamins. So that means you feel depressed. You also need B vitamins to convert serotonin into melatonin. so that not only are you depressed, but you can't sleep. Now, also, melatonin is one of the most potent anti-carcinogenic substances in the body, which also explains why fibromyalgia patients have higher rates of cancer. So, what have we covered right now? Chronic stress. You can explain why these women all show up with the fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, depression, insomnia, autoimmune issues, and digestive issues all at the same time. Next, you also get adrenal issues and thyroid issues. So, for example, if you're under long-term stress, your adrenal glands go into hyper mode called hyperadrenia, which then suppresses the thyroid because you can't have the adrenals going and the thyroid. Think of them opposites. Thyroid's about long-term healing, health, growth, repair. The adrenal glands are about stress and survival. But the problem is the adrenal glands have a limit, like any organ, and when they collapse, you get what's called hypoadrenia. Then the thyroid has to step back up to pick up the slack to keep your energy up. The problem is that the thyroid is about trying to create level stability, but it's not good at dealing with stress, so you get these people having hyperthyroid and going in the reverse. Then the problem is when the thyroid also burns out, now you got both hypoadrenia and hypothyroid, and this is a real bad situation. Now, you also get, over long-term stress, what's called the parasympathetic, remember that rest and digest, that shutdown. All of those functions of parasympathetic also include lubrication, whether it's the eyes, the mouth, digestion, and even the vaginal tract, which is why you get these dry eyes, dry mouth. For these women, intercourse is painful, and then on top of it, you can get a sympathetic, and when you got all this dry eyes, dry mouth, dry tract phenomenon, we have a name for that called Sjogren's disease, but you can see it as a parasympathetic shutdown. And then on top of that, you get a sympathetic wind-up, which means you're more sensitive to allergies, and then you can't control the blood flow in your arms, and you get what's called Raynaud's phenomenon, reflex sympathetic dystrophy, where you get these women with blue hands, painful hands, swelling, and no medication, nothing is helping them. Adjusting doesn't help. I had a patient this past week who had a massive brain imbalance that exactly corresponded to the side of her reflex sympathetic dystrophy on her arm. Now, she actually had a reverse brain profile to most women because she was a single mom with to raise 3 kids. So she had to go into complete left brain executive mode and make decisions all the time. So she went into the reverse, and what happened is her right brain basically shut down, and the right side of the brain controls the same side blood regulation. Most people think the right brain controls the left side of the body. That's not true. It controls voluntary motion, but it controls the same side blood vascularity. So it's much more complicated than people realize. So she had a severe right brain deficit combined with an injury to the right shoulder, which then occluded the nerves and the blood flow to the arm, and she got Raynaud's phenomenon in her right hand. And in one visit, I was able to balance out her brain and deal with the shoulder injury. Her hand felt normal for the first time in years. That doesn't always happen on the first visit. Miracles do happen, but it happened this week, and I can tell you this woman's extremely grateful. And the reason why it worked is because I knew how to diagnose brain imbalance, and I was also able to catch that she was a reverse profile to most women, and it worked. So, do you understand now how chronic stress, you can also throw in this Sjogren's stuff and the thyroid stuff and the adrenal stuff, and it gets even worse. Okay, so now you've got chronic stress. Now you've got high blood sugar. You need high blood sugar under stress because you need sugar to fuel the muscles. Because your body's anticipating, I need to use the sugar quickly to run or fight for my life. But if you're sitting there stressing out and there's no tiger to chase, to run away from, you're just sitting stressing all the time, particularly in a sedentary culture, you just have high blood sugar, high blood sugar, high blood sugar, which also means that the body has to get rid of that sugar in the blood. Otherwise, you end up with cardiovascular disease because sugar attracts water. Sugar sticks to the vessels, to the blood cells on the the blood vessels on the inside. The Scrabble word for you to look up is called glycation damage. GLYCATION. Thank you, peanut gallery. Glycation damage. That is the word about damage from sugar hanging around too much longer. In fact, when you go get a particular blood test called hemoglobin H1C, it's looking at how much sugar is in the blood that has attacked the blood cells specifically. So now the body will get rid of sugar in the blood. And the reason why, because if you don't, you will damage the blood vessels and you can ultimately bleed internally. So what is worse? The body bleeding internally from too much high blood sugar, or A, you throw it into the fat cells and you get obese, or B, you throw it into the muscles to be burned quickly, but you get a lot of lactic acid buildup and you feel chronic muscle pain. So what is smart? Getting rid of the sugar in the blood and making you fat or in pain, or leaving it in the blood and you end up dying from internal bleeding. Do you see how even when the body has a quote disease process, it's actually being intelligent because the alternative is much, much worse. So I'm telling you this is because a lot of these women hate their bodies. They feel like, why is my body doing this to me? I'm in so much pain, I'm overweight, it's just like, why is my body betraying me? And the answer is that it's trying to survive the best it can given the circumstance. Your body will always prioritize survival over aesthetics and over how you feel. And it is trying to help you survive. Now with this information, you can now begin to turn the boat around and become empowered to move in the right direction. But you have to believe me that your body is trying to do its best to stay alive, despite how uncomfortable, painful, and frustrating it is. Okay? So I'm asking you to just trust me on that and to hang in there. And we're going to get to solutions in a minute. So now, with high blood sugar, you also get like the thyroid and the adrenal glands can quit, so can the pancreas, and that's when you can get type 2 diabetes. And if you have high blood sugar, you also have depressed immune system, which means more infections, more cancer, and if you're under high stress, what that means is you're also getting higher clotting factors in your blood, which means that you're at a higher risk of stroke. Now, why would you have higher clotting factors in your blood? Well, if you're running away from a tiger, what makes more sense? Shutting down the immune system and increasing clotting factors, or the reverse? You tell me, if a tiger is gnawing on your leg, is a white blood cell going to fend it off? No. And if you are stressed and fear for your life, you're probably likely to get into a fight, or you're running away, which means you may get gashed on the way from a tree branch or a rock, or from the thing that's trying to attack you. So you need to clot to prevent you from hemorrhaging to death. So that's why you have a depressed immune system and higher clotting factors when under stress. It's to keep you alive based on millions of years of adaptation in the wilderness. It makes complete sense, complete and utter total sense if you understand that paradigm. So now we've also got musculoskeletal issues as well as chronic issues from chronic stress. So for example, if you're under stress, chronic stress, your posture will do this. That's called a guarding reflex because you're trying to protect your neck because it's vulnerable and you can bleed to death if it's gashed. You're collapsing in because you're trying to protect your internal organs and you're ready to run or fight. Now the problem is if you're chronically like this, then you're crushing the artery and nerves that go to your arm, and you can creating hand sensations which can mimic carpal tunnel. You're also creating altered posture. We're going to get to even more details on that in a minute. But you're compressing your ribs. And if you compress your ribs, that means you can't breathe properly. If you can't breathe properly, that means you have less oxygen, which means you have higher risk of brain damage and chronic brain degenerative diseases, such as Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, even ADD and depression. When you lose oxygen to the brain, your frontal lobes begin to recede, and this is where you can get these other issues going on. Also, with less oxygen, you have more acidity, which means you have more cancers, infections, degeneration, osteoporosis. Your frontal lobes shut down, which means you have higher blood pressure, and you have mood changes as well. And when you're bent forward like this, you're tethering your spinal cord, which means you're losing some blood flow to the spinal cord, which means you get functional deficits not only in your extremities but also in your organs as well. Then you can get stretching and weakening of the spinal muscles, which means you get alterations in how your disc sits and spurring and fusion of your vertebra. And then you get even more musculoskeletal issues. So if you get rounded shoulders, you get a bone spur and a torn rotator cuff, because now your supraspinatus muscle is now overstretching, and bone will grow in response to the pressures placed upon it. And you know, the bone is trying to catch up with a muscle that's being chronically pulled, and that's when you get a bone spur. And then you can have more risk for torn cuffs and whatnot. Elbow flexion, that means this, you're guarding. So you stretch the ulnar nerve, you get tingling here. You get a hypertonic, which means chronically stressed pronator teres, which is the muscle that rotates the arm like this. Now, the median nerve travels through here, or one branch of it anyway, and that can lead to mimic carpal tunnel syndrome, but it's actually not carpal tunnel, it's over in here in the pronator teres by the elbow. You can also get wrist flexion, which gets carpal tunnel directly, and when you also alter your lower body, where you can get flexion from hunching over, you can also get spasm in your piriformis, both leading to sciatica, and you can get tension in your calves. Why? Because you're constantly on your toes, because you're ready to run or fight. Achilles tendonitis, your leg changes its rotation, which means you can get pronation, and then plantar fasciitis. So from head to toe, from the inside out, chronic stress will create chronic disease. So I've pretty much covered a lot of the major diseases that a lot of mostly women suffer with. Yes, men do suffer with some of these as well, but not nearly to the extent, especially all coming together and one presenting all at once with a single patient like women do. So the question is, how do we balance the brain? Now, the good news is that the brain can change thanks to the modern study of neuroplasticity, which is another Scrabble word for the brain can change and grow and adapt based on the stimuli and nutrition that it's given. So the way to engage neuroplasticity, to reactivate and heal the brain, is to A, stimulate the side of the brain that's weaker, and you use all 5 of the senses for that. 2, then 2, you reduce stressful stimuli, especially the major one that hurts us all, and that's excessive screen time. 3 is to get your spine and joints properly adjusted according to your brain profile. And this is what I've been trained in, is that when you stimulate joints on one side of the body, like if you adjust the right side, your right arm, you directly stimulate the opposite side brain. So you can use this to your advantage in order to target the weaker brain, which is what I did with this patient with the Raynaud's phenomenon in her hands. I specifically targeted the weak side brain with my adjusting, which radically changed the blood flow and integration of the other side of her body. Okay. Now, there's a website of which I'm one of these registered diplomates called the American Chiropractic Neurology Board, and you can worldwide. It's in a bunch of countries, and you can find one that's nearest you. There's currently 2, including myself, that I'm aware of here in New Zealand. One north of Auckland, and the other one me in Hamilton, New Zealand. The other thing you can do, the 4th one, is to keep your brain in context of the whole picture, meaning that if you attend to all other aspects of your health, whether it's nutrition or making sure you're having proper bowel movements to get rid of toxins, or you're properly exercising, or you're not exposing yourself to toxic chemicals, or you're eating breakfast, you're decreased the levels of stress in your life, you're sleeping better, you don't have any chronic infections, all of those will feed in and support the brain also. It's wellness is not separating out one thing from another. You can see they all intermingle and mix and interweave with each other. So in the next set of videos, I'm going to go over specifically how to practically balance the brain using each of the 5 senses. I will also show you how to specifically reduce the major stimuli that is stressing out the brain, which is screen stimuli. Watch internet, television, computer. I will also show you specifically how to find brain-friendly doctors and give you specific advice and criteria of how to know if you have the right clinician for you, a brain-friendly clinician. I will also teach you how to keep the brain in context. So thank you very much for watching this video. I hope it served you. And this video again covered how brain imbalance creates this gender split between why men die quick, violent deaths usually, and why women develop this chronic, degenerative, slow, painful decay over the course of their lives. So thank you so much for watching this. Again, my name is Dr. Sam Shea. I'm the founder of 10pointwellness.com. Please feel free to leave a comment below, and please feel free to share this and like us on Facebook. And I look forward to you watching the next videos that empower you how to balance out your brain on your own. Thank you.